Lars, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've watched
man.
all the videos you've done with Nico and the factory, and you're such a wonderful ambassador already for Sadowski. And so it's just a total pleasure to finally meet you in person.
Thank you very much. Believe me, the pleasure is mine.
So welcome to the Sadowski family officially.
Thanks, man.
Now, I know already that you have a recording studio. You probably have you told me about 50 basses.
Yeah.
Why now are you playing a Sadowski?
Well, I've had quite a few Sadowski instruments in my hands recently. And basically, I like them all, And since I'm a rather traditional guy when it comes to basses in general, I'd say I like the old Fenders. I have a couple of Gibsons. I have my Music Mans, my beloved Music Mans. But this is sort of like the J bass type, but one step further.
Right.
And that's what I like about this particular model.
Yeah, people have always described my instruments as a Fender on steroids.
Right. That's where you come from, right?
I think Leo got 90% right the first time. And what I've done is taken it just to a higher level. When I started my own business in 1979 in New York City, all of my clients were the session guys.
Right.
Okay, they were the guys doing the Broadway shows, they were the guys doing the jingle dates, they were the guys doing the record dates. So they were bringing their instruments to me, which were, at the time, you couldn't go into a studio unless you had a jazz bass or a P bass.
Producers would expect you to bring a Fender type bass.
The Union Directory in New York in 1980 had two chapters for bass. One was acoustic bass, and the other was Fender bass.
Fender bass.
So you couldn't walk into a studio with anything but a Fender bass. Okay. Especially the jingle dates, which were short sessions. And an engineer was not going to take 10 minutes to dial in a bass he'd never recorded before.
Right.
So there was pressure on the players to, especially the ones who wanted to try new basses, to go into a session with something that wasn't a Fender. So I was spending a lot of my time then. They would bring me their Fenders, which were usually nice late 50s, early 60s Fenders, like a lot of early 60s L Series J basses, which probably my favorite vintage Fender.
Okay. Yes.
And first thing I was doing was shielding the electronics because nobody knew how to do that then.
Yes.
So I started off with shielding work, making them quiet, doing really good fret work, cutting new nuts, setting them up. Most of my work in the early 80s was taking their Fenders and making them as good as I could. And I was also very early to experiment with active tone circuits.
And how did that come about?
Well, I had a mentor. His name was Ron Armstrong. He used to work at Alembic, and then he started a company with two other guys in San Francisco called Stars Guitars. They were the first company to start making active tone circuits that you could buy and put into existing instruments.
So the aftermarket. Kind of type, yeah.
So I had one customer first who was telling me that he felt he wasn't cutting through in the mix well, and I gave him the two-band treble bass boost circuit, and he told me it was just amazing.
Wow.
And he was mostly doing live playing. And then the next guy who came in happened to have been Marcus Miller. Marcus brought me his 1977 jazz bass, and he said...
The Marcus Miller bass.
Right.
Yeah.
And he had heard about me from all the other guys, and he said, make this the best bass you can make it.
Wow.
So, complete refret, re-true the fingerboard, refret it, new nut, a heavier bridge. I think I put a badass bridge on it.
Yes.
And again, I redid all the electronics and I installed this active circuit. And again,
The rest is history.
Exactly, exactly. And so I got better and cleaner with my installation. I didn't have to route it. I didn't have to make a big pick guard like I did for Marcus. All the feedback was from the players that they're cutting through in the mix so much better in the studio. The engineers and the front of house sound guys were saying, I don't have to touch a thing on the board. This space just is perfect. So that's really what got me strongly in the bass direction. I started out making acoustic guitars, and then I was making electric guitars. I never expected to be a bass maker primarily, but that's the way history took me. And my philosophy is you ride the horse in the direction the horse is going, and that direction was basses.
Right.
Then, though, when the vintage market took off in the mid-'80s, the modifications I was doing, if they were clean pieces, would have devalued them as vintage instruments, because it's all about originality. So that's when I made a commitment and start making my own instruments.
What year was that exactly?
I made my first 3 basses in 1982. But the vintage market really took off around 85. And that's when I decided I need to stop modifying the Fenders, unless they were already player guitars, they'd been refinished, whatever. But if they were at all original, I wasn't going to devalue them. And that's when I really started building my own basses.
And have you been doing the graphite stripe thing right from the start?
No, that came later. That's probably about now 20 years ago. I always battled the dreaded 7th fret dead spot on the G string on a Fender. And it was always, how do you resolve this? I initially approached it by making my headstock as thick as possible. And then the next step was adding the graphite in the neck. And aside from the dead spot, the graphite just makes everything much more even along. I get so many comments from players of how even my basses are everywhere on the fingerboard. So I attribute all that to the graphite and the thicker headstock.
Okay. It was a couple of years ago that when you teamed up with Hans-Peter Wilfer from Warwick in Germany. How did that happen?
Well, I had been making a less expensive line of my basses for many years in Japan. And I started doing business in Japan as far back as 1987. And then my distributor hired a young repair guy who was inspired by my work, and he wanted to train with me. So they sent him over. He worked with me almost for a full year. And then he went back to Japan, and he became my authorized repair guy. My basses have always been expensive, but I also know that there were players who couldn't afford my basses. So how do I bring my work at a lower price? And I never wanted to have a factory. I like to have a small workshop. So I started working with my colleagues in Japan, and we started making my Metro line in 2003. And that lasted until 2019. What the limit for me was my partners were only interested in the Japan market. So I had to handle all the sales and distribution outside of Japan. I want to be at my workbench making a bass. I don't want to be doing that kind of business stuff. So I've been thinking for a couple of years, who could I partner with that not only had a great factory, but had worldwide distribution? And I got to know HP a few years earlier. He was setting up an amp demo room, and he was doing the bass camps. And he wanted to have some basses in there that weren't only just Warwick basses. So he bought several basses from me. For his demo room for the amps. And there was a Nashville NAMM show that I was at, that he was at, and he and my wife got to know each other because they were both outside smoking cigarettes
Oh,
together.
okay.
So
that's the way life goes.
Exactly. Exactly. But I just woke up one morning, and again, I've been thinking for 2 years, who can I do my dream with? And I woke up one morning, early January of 19, and I just knew it had to be Hans Peter. There was no one else who had what I was looking for. So I wrote him an email. And I said, would you be interested in doing a partnership where you make my production line of Sadowski basses? And 2 hours later, I get an email from him. Oh, I'm so excited, Roger. I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. So we had our first meeting like 2 weeks after that at the NAMM show. And we kept meeting and talking for the next 6 months. And by August of 21, we had an agreement that we signed together. And we started production right at the beginning of the pandemic. So that was a challenge, too, because I couldn't travel to Germany. I couldn't travel to China. So it was every day FaceTiming with Marcus. And Marcus being the production manager here. And so every day we would FaceTime and discuss what we had to do, and is this okay and that okay, and them sending me samples back and forth. The first year getting production going was harder than it needed to be because of COVID, but by the end of 21 we were in a great place, and it just keeps getting better all the time. And so the last 2 days working with the guys in the factory and sharing my experience, my knowledge with them, like yesterday when you picked up your bass, I dialed in the final setup.
But you're still approving like every step they're doing here, right?
Absolutely. I want my German Sadowski instruments to be 100% Sadowski, so I need to share with them how I would do this and how I would do that, and as long as it works with their production methods, that's the way it should be.
But still, there's a couple new ideas like the Sadowski Just Sonata.
Yeah, well, that's something Warwick has been doing for a long time, and
you saw it and you liked it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm as open to their new things as they are to my things. Like I really work with them. I've done a lot of work over the last 40 years with hum canceling pickups. Again, with the clientele I've been working with, hum is always an issue. Obviously, single coil pickups are the sound reference for what excellence should be. So the goal is, how do you get a hum-free pickup to sound as close to a single coil as possible? And that's been one of my goals for the last 40 years. So working with them on my pickup designs, we work very closely together, my active electronics. So it's been a collaboration. I mean, they have things to bring to the table, and I have things to bring to the table. It's been a great collaboration. And Hans Peter, I have to give him credit. He is so obsessed with quality. There's been absolute no sacrifices in quality at all.
What can we expect from the future?
Being a small maker, unlike big companies, I don't have to come out with a new model every year. Because what you end up is a lot of stupid stuff, just to have a new model.
Lots of pressure.
I also don't like to have a lot of artist models, because I think the more artist models you have, the more it dilutes the value of the artist model. So I only have 2 artist models on the bass, Willie, and I have Verdine White from Earth, Wind & Fire. So I'm not looking to grow do a lot of new artist models. I'm also a believer of, I used to hate instruments when I was younger that said they got 25 different sounds, but only 2 of them were any good. So I don't like extra knobs, extra switches. My feeling is I want my basses to be plug and play.
Yes. But still, I've heard rumors about a Sadowski Germany guitar?
Well, yeah, we're definitely going to get into guitars in the next 2 years, and without a doubt, I've been making solo body guitars even longer than I've been making basses.
Yeah.
So we will definitely be doing that. I have a line of archtop jazz guitars that I've been making in Japan that eventually I know we can do here in Germany. So yeah, I mean, there are lots of things we're going to be doing. But just cranking out new models every year just for the sake of that, we're not going to do that. Yeah. We're going to do our limited editions every year where we choose special woods, But I think the models we have now are pretty well cover the range that I'm looking to serve players with.
I totally agree. Yeah. Roger, it's been such a pleasure.
I know.
To meet you and to chat with you.
I feel like I've known you for such a long time already. So, another handshake.
Thank you so much, man.
Well, thank you, Lars, and welcome to the family.
Yeah, thanks for having me.